This is Hot Science with the week's top news in science, technology, environment, and medicine. I'm Richard Clarke. I'm your host, and welcome. And before we start, I want to talk a little bit about Hot Science coming to a close. I've been doing Hot Science for what, 5 years, Fred?
About that.
Something like that. And Fred and I started doing it at LCS back in the old days. And we had lots of people come. Usually it was 40 or 50, sometimes as many as 70 in the summer during when Fred was gone. It got down to 8 or 10, but always somebody was there. And when the pandemic started, it didn't take us very long to figure out how to do it over Zoom, and we've done it since then on Zoom. And doing it on Zoom, then I was able to record it and post it on Facebook, and people have been watching it on Facebook too. But anyway, over the last year, the people who have been joining me, the attendance has been going down. And what I really started to figure was that it's just too much work for the hours and eyeballs I have. I'm posting it on YouTube, as I say. Yes, we're just getting about 5 hours a week watching on YouTube. So altogether, like this week will be about 10 hours, 5 hours on YouTube and 5 hours from you guys. And to do this takes about a day of effort on my part to do the Hot Science. And right now I'm busy 7 days a week, and I start to feel like I'm 79 and maybe I don't have to work 7 days a week anymore. And I have other stuff I'm doing that is still quite successful, these meditation groups and things like that I do and put them on YouTube. Since I've started to focus on them, I've increased the audience from 1,500 a month to almost 8,000 a month, and increased the number of hours from less than 100 a month to more than 300 a month. So we're getting lots of people watching this other stuff. And anyway, it just seems like the time doing Hot Science, maybe the time for that is past. I'm still going to continue to do the weekly science newsletter. So that will still be there, and still will have lots of content for you to read through. I want to be doing that for me because that's the way I stay current with all this stuff. And this is still a rich period for science in the world. And if I don't keep current, then already there's so much stuff going on. I feel like if I don't pay attention for a few days, I'm terribly behind again. So
I think that's very useful for the rest of us, Richard.
Good, I hope so.
Yes.
I hope so. I get lots of reports from different people about the weekly science newsletter. So I'm glad you guys get some use out of it and you read it. And what I think is important is to read about it and think about it and try to imagine what the consequences of this stuff is. because we're still in this amazing period. Okay, so anyway, that's the story. Any questions?
No, fair.
Okay, okay. So let me get on with the show. And this week, the stories are, the top several stories are actually battery stories. And the top news story, the headline is how to build a very cheap battery. And it turns out how to build a very cheap battery is to start with something that is cheap. And what they're using is iron oxide, rust. What's cheaper than rust? And then in EVs, I have two battery stories. One about China's CATL is going to start mass production of M3P batteries this year. I believe that's some kind of solid state battery, and it doesn't use as many of the precious materials. And then another Chinese company, BYD, is going to launch their first sodium ion battery car this year. And this is a battery that uses cheap material and no lithium. So changes are happening in the battery world. In environment, there is an article, an eye-opening projection about America's clean energy future. And it may not be as bad as you think. And in materials, scientists discover an easy way to make atomically thin metal layers for new technology. And in space, NASA's Artemis astronauts will likely 3D print batteries on the moon. So that's one way to get energy. And in biology, scientists stumble on a new way to hack photosynthesis for renewable energy and discovered more about how photosynthesis actually works in plants. And in the human story, alongside math and reading, schools are now teaching happiness. Now, maybe that's something that you can use in your life. Maybe some people could use happiness better than they could use algebra. I liked algebra. Okay, and finally, the medical story, a single injection of stem cells slashes risk of heart attack or stroke by 58%. So that's pretty significant results. And I'm looking forward when that is finished with testing and available here in Mexico. I suspect that kind of thing will be something that is adopted fairly quickly in Mexico because of the way the Mexico medical establishment works. So here, now on to how to build a very cheap battery. When Billy Woodford and his friends set out to build a new kind of battery that could replace a coal plant, their idea took inspiration from a disposable hand warming sack that spectators use in cold places at football stadiums. The battery's key ingredient like the hand warmer, is rust. So they made a startup, Form Energy Inc., that started up in 2017, 5 years ago. And what they're trying to do is to make something utilities could use, like a lithium ion batteries, but lithium ion batteries are way too expensive for energy utility scale applications. And so they're trying to figure out a way to do it that is cheap enough to deploy, and the kind of batteries you need for a utility system, they figure need to operate for 100 hours. And so that's also quite a load for a lithium ion battery. And, finally, it comes down to cost. And so they're bringing a new chemistry of materials from the lab to a commercial application. On the average, with battery technologies, this takes 15 years. And they were concerned about that average because they need them a lot faster. We're in the middle of deploying those kind of systems around the US and the world right now. And so they have built their battery in record time, 4 years from the first pilot, and then it will be another 3 years, 7 years altogether to the first commercial deployment. So instead of 15 years for a new technology to get to the market, it'll be 7 years. And this 100-hour battery, they knew, had to rely on cheap materials. The choices came down to iron or sulfur, and because it's easier to handle, they focused on iron. And they were encouraged about iron because they remembered something that you would take to the football game in the snow on the East Coast, some little sack that you would squeeze the sack, and it would make the iron particles in the sack oxidize. And when they oxidize, the sack would keep your hand warm. So they realized that rusting released energy. They wanted to figure out how to use that energy instead of to heat your hand to make a battery. And so anyway, they developed a reaction chemistry that can release the energy in terms of electricity. And they found that same chemistry, then when you had excess electricity, could store it. So that's a battery. Battery stores and releases electricity, and they can do it with their rust battery. They've received already $900 million worth of investment. So other people are backing them, including their backers are Bill Gates led Breakthrough Energy Venture, and they signed agreements with a bunch of power companies. And right now, they are constructing a $760 million battery manufacturing plant in West Virginia that's going to open up by the end of 2024. So that's the 7 years they'll be in production. They have these partnerships already with energy companies, and they're going to be deployed basically almost immediately. And right now, the only place you can see their battery working is in a warehouse in Berkeley, California, and it looks kind of glued together, and they're working and doing the testing they need to do. It's in a plastic box the size of a small refrigerator, but to get their cost targets, they can't spend much money on aesthetics. What it looks like they will be able to do, though, is their battery system will be available at 1/7 of the cost of the lithium ion battery. That is about 15% of the cost of the existing technology. And so this makes the battery technology cheap and easily to install, and is just what's going to be needed for this growing renewable energy area. And they've tested it. Their approach, it wasn't easy to do, but they've got an approach that can be charged and discharged hundreds of times. And so anyway, they have found a new way to make utility scale batteries. And it turns out for them, the more iron air batteries that the company builds, then the cheaper it's going to be. So this is going to be 1/7 of the current cost when it's just starting off at the beginning of its learning curve for this new technology. So that's what we got for the rust batteries. Any comments?
It's clear that grid storage needs something other than lithium ion. Lithium ion portable applications is fine because you get a good energy density per kilogram. But the requirements for grid storage are different.
Right, very different. So again, there are all these clever guys. And who would have thought that rust would be the solution to battery? I always thought rust was a problem. Hello, Mary Ellen. Okay, the next battery story is a Chinese story. Chinese battery giant CATL is going to start this year mass producing and delivering new materials technology, M3P. I think that is solid state, isn't it, Norman? The other organization that's going to go heavy into M3P batteries this year is Tesla. And I guess Tesla will be making their own in their gigafactories, not buying them from CATL. And these M3P batteries have a greater energy density. They're not using any nickel or cobalt, so they use material that is more available. They're still lithium ion batteries though, and they still use lithium batteries. We'll get about a 15% increase in power density in mileage. And so the Tesla car that they're talking about now would get 430 miles on a charge. So it builds up the mileage, I guess, from 350 to 430. And their CATL is selling to Tesla, Volkswagen, BMW, and Ford, and they're the world's biggest manufacturer, accounting to about 1/3 of the sale of batteries for cars worldwide. And so this is one technology that is going into production in multiple places this year. It's still a lithium ion, but without some of the other materials. And alternatively, BYD is going to launch their first sodium ion battery this year. And this doesn't use any of the precious materials. It doesn't use lithium. And they're going to start with a small car the Seagull, which is intended as an in-town car. In China, the base model will have a range of about 300 kilometers, which would be fine for most people here at Lakeside. That would get you to Guadalajara and back just fine. And in China, the list price for this looks like it would be about $9,000. So tremendously cheaper. They're going to have one with a 400K range available for less than $12,000. I don't know what the price is going to be outside China. I've heard this is another car that will be in the mid 20,000s when it's available outside of China. And right now, the sodium ion batteries cost is the same as the lithium ion batteries that they're making currently. But again, BYD believes that they're going to be able to get the cost down as they get the production volumes up. And so in the battery world, we have been worrying for the last couple of years, will we have enough lithium and rare metals to continue to produce the batteries we need in the world? And I haven't been as worried about it because of these new technologies. And it looks like these new technologies are here.
Right from the get-go, those batteries were the main thing that people were like, oh my God, they're so expensive. And now, like you said, they're coming down and they're coming up with so much new technology. And
Right.
Rich, I remember way in the beginning, you were like one of the first ones who was starting talking about all this stuff. So it's really over the last 5 years, so much has come to fruition. You know? So, yeah.
It's interesting for me to watch it happen because this is also a new technology story where, once you start having this idea, you figure out better and better how to do it, and you make what you think are incremental improvements. And by the time you're through, all of a sudden it's twice as good or 5 times as good as it was in the last generation.
Great.
So here we are. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why I have enjoyed doing this hot science, because, I feel like we're, right on the sidelines watching the show going on. Okay. Okay. So here, somebody's mic is badly. I turned your mic off, Mary Ellen. Maybe that made a difference. Okay, anyway, let us go to the next story. The next story is about America's clean energy future. And, while people have kind of not been watching, the combination of the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law have pumped hundreds of billions of dollars into environmental spending, largely on things like renewable energy, but all through the energy system, including trying to improve the grid and all those things. And this is the first study that was done that looked at all the things that are going on. And they say now what they believe is by the end of the decade, we will meet a major decarbonization milestone that is in America to generate 80% of the electricity without burning fossil fuels. That's more than twice what we're doing today, and it would make America's power grid one of the cleanest in the world. The climate pollution from the power sector could plunge up to 84% below its current state. And this is a reminder of the significance of these two laws. Now, it looks like one of the concerns is America's ability to build new transmission lines, and there are problems that way. They looked at that, and that there's a lot going on there. And if the worst case is if this transition is slowed down by transmission line at the low end, it would still produce a grid that is 71% cleaner. And so that's still significant improvement. And there also are other benefits that are a part of this. Coal and natural gas plants release many toxic air pollutants, particularly soot and particulate matter known as PM 2.5 because they measure less than 2.5 microns across. These wreak havoc in the body, but over the next decade, as coal and gas plants close, the PM 2.5 subside. And because of this, by 2030, this could avert 11 to 19,000 deaths a year. So it lowers the death rate. And they figure maybe $1 trillion in cost savings that will come through these laws, basically 100 billion in reduced electricity costs to people because its renewables are cheaper. And they figure the health benefits would be maybe $200 million in reduced health care costs because of this. And the third benefit is still harder to quantify in dollars. This is the benefit from not polluting the climate as much. And so these are costs that are avoided, and they think there'll be $880 billion in avoided climate damage. But even if you take those out of it, you still have a couple of $100 billion in improvement. And while these acts are not perfect, they really will turbocharge the transformation of the American energy system into renewables. And we're going to see a big impact by 2030, which is not so far away.
We hope.
Spain and Portugal are already at 50%. How we can improve so much in 7 years is hard to understand.
Well, they said we're at about 40% now, so we'll just double there. And you see, if you look at the numbers going by, there's immense investment going into the US, and the investment is really speeded up by this IRA that was passed last year. And this also fits one of the things that I've been saying for a while. I don't know if any of you remember, but a couple of years ago, I was talking about an alternate view of the future where 10 or 20 years ago, we could go out in our city and wonder why the air is so clean. And so that's actually happening too.
Good.
Okay. Any other comments? Then let me go to the material story. So we'll put you all asleep for this, and I'll ring my bell or something when it's over to wake you up, okay? Now, they have a new material with promise for new applications. And we've been hearing about this for the last couple of years. This kind of material is atomic layers of metal, and between the layers of metals, then they can put in different ions between the layers for different electronic properties. And this makes them potentially very useful for high-tech electronics and energy storage. These materials are known as MXenes, and while they found them several years ago, they were limited in their use because they were really expensive to fabricate. And what has happened here is a group of scientists have found a way to fabricate them easily and inexpensively, where basically
Okay. Beauty and
they are making them using inexpensive precursors without the use of hydrofluoric acid, which is nasty stuff. And it consists of just one step, mixing several chemicals with whatever metal you want to make the thin layer of, and then heating it to 1700 degree F. And when you open it up, then you have your flat layers of MXenes where you can do with whatever you want to do with. And so now this material, now that they have an inexpensive and easy way to build it and fabricate it, will be one of the things that we hear about in these future technology articles. We'll be hearing about the application of this material.
This is the area that I usually glaze over.
Yes.
But I like this whole idea. Can you give me what you think might be a practical application?
Well, one of the things they think is that since you can store ions in between the areas, batteries are things that have these ions available. And so you can make it energy storage devices out of these MXenes. Another area that they talk about is electromagnetic shielding. You know, in the middle of all of this high-tech stuff, we have things that emit god-awful amounts of what's called EMI, electromagnetic interference. You know, this is radio waves going out in the universe.
Yeah.
And part of the problem with it is the component sitting next to it, the EMI messes them up.
Okay.
And so it's a problem. How do you shield these things? I remember when I was at National Semiconductor working on a project making their first video game. The video game had a video processor in it that emitted tons of EMI, and the guy had to build this big metal cage around the unit so it would pass the FCC tests. Here, you'll have a way to be able to make small local EMI protectors, and this will be one of the things that improves communications and enable communications to continue operating at higher and higher frequency.
Mhm. Okay. Good.
Okay. Good question. The question always with this strange stuff is, what can you use this for? And sometimes if it's early in the development, they'll say, beats me. They won't write that in the article though. Okay. The next article is a space article. And to me, this answers part of my own questions about, how are we going to do stuff on the moon and Mars? Because, it's a long way to ship materials to do things like build habitats and to build energy systems and stuff like this. And so it turns out the NASA has thought about that too. Surprise, surprise. And they have their mad schemes. Let me show you kind of a little bit of a picture of how they're going to 3D print batteries from the dirt you find on Mars and on the moon. So the idea is simple. You gather stuff, you put it through some process, so you extract the material you need, then you mix it together and make what you need, and then you just run it through 3D printer and make your batteries by your 3D printer. That way you don't have to ship them from the Earth. And not only are they planning to make batteries with 3D printers, they're also planning to make solar cells with 3D printers, because you got to get the electricity from somewhere. And oh, by the way, the guys on the moon have to live somewhere. So they're planning on using similar processes for making the lunar habitat. So these are all things that they are planning to do with the Artemis mission. And to me, it shows really how ambitious that mission is. It's not just to get people to the moon and have them stay there for a while. It's to seriously investigate and figure out, how do you make self-sustaining environments in places like the moon and in Mars. And I hadn't imagined, I knew they were going to use 3D printers. I hadn't imagined that they were going to be 3D printing their solar cells and their batteries, though. So clever guys. What do you think?
So when you mentioned the solar cells, they'll 3D print them. I thought it might be the frame.
No, they're going to 3D print them. There already are guys on the Earth. There's a company on the Earth that is making 3D printed solid state batteries, and they're saying and that's their production machine. They don't have any other production machines, and they're saying, if you want a weird shaped battery to fit in your thing, we can make it for you, custom design it, and print it at the spot.
Right, and they're also making the solar film, the solar
yes
film. not just the frames of the solar panels.
Right, yes,
Wow, okay,
yes.
I didn't know that.
And those are different efforts. That's a Jeff Bezos effort to make the 3D printed solar panels.
Okay.
Richard, I assume that the 3D printing requires materials to do the printing on.
Right,
Where do they get the materials that they're going to be printing?
from the dirt on the moon and Mars.
So most of this printing just requires dirt?
They say regolith. It's a kind of stone material that is available on the surface. Now, on the moon, I don't know if you read this, but they also found on the moon an enormous amount of water that is basically in little grains like sand all over the surface of the water. And so now they're not at all concerned about getting water on the moon. It's they have to figure out how to get the water out of the moon sand, but it's everywhere.
Wow.
So this is going to happen. Now, when are they going to put the manned people on the moon, Daryl?
End of 2024,
Okay, I thought it was pretty fast. That's next year.
or it might get delayed to the beginning of 2025, but
Right.
it's not far away.
That's right. So that's 18-month time frame. And I saw we had the pictures of these astronauts, and there was, of course, a woman mission
Yeah.
specialist. That meant she's not flying it.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be 4 astronauts, and the first Artemis 2 mission will take about 10 days, and they'll actually go further beyond the moon. They'll be the first humans the farthest away from Earth in space travel, because they're going way beyond the moon.
Okay, that's right. They're going to orbit around it.
Yeah, and really far. Nothing like the Apollo missions where they kind of stayed
Wow.
real close.
Wow.
Yeah,
It'll, this stuff is exciting.
yeah.
Okay. Now, just continuing along, this is a discovery that is billed as a mind-blowing discovery. And what scientists were looking at is they were studying the photosynthesis carefully to try to understand what was happening with electrons in the process, and trying to figure out if they could somehow get some electrons out of the process earlier so they could use them to do things with renewable fuels and make renewable fuels. And while they were working and using a new kind of process to equipment to observe photosynthesis at an extremely fast time scale of a millionth of a second, the researchers found that there's a protein scaffold where the initial chemical reactions take place, and it's allowing some electrons to escape and trying to follow what happens to those electrons. What they discovered was a metabolic method that they didn't know about for electron transfer in plants. These metabolic methods are the things that the plants use to extract energy from food. And so they discovered a new metabolic pathway that they didn't know anything about. And while you're trying to work with plants and figure out how to be able to use plants, for example, to generate energy, being able to understand all of these energy pathways in the plants becomes important. And here it's kind of funny. This is another case of science. They say, quote, "At first we thought we made a mistake. It took us a while to convince ourselves that we had really discovered this." And so we don't know how they're going to use this new plant metabolic pathway. We use plants to generate a lot of material and food and energy on the planet, and understanding the way that plants themselves make their own food gives us particular insight that we're going to end up being able to use to make them be more effective producing food and energy. So it's another mistake. The scientists were looking for something and found something else entirely that was cooler than what they were looking for. And we have a lot of stories like that of the scientists making a mistake and discovering something new. Okay, I figured this one would get about the same response as the material story. I don't see your biology charts behind you, Daryl. No, that's right. One of the things that doing the science things has really worked on for me, by the way, is my understanding of biology, which is still, I think, pretty poor. But trying to figure out how to explain these stories to you guys over the years has really enhanced what I know. So I appreciate it. Okay, and now, besides math and reading, schools are teaching happiness. And here I'll start with just an episode out of a school in Germany. The children at the elementary school here are planting a garden of emotions. One by one, they step up to the front of their class, and in the hands, they have a paper flower on which they have written what made them joyful this morning. "I got to snuggle with my dog," a young girl says. "I found a coin on the street," says a boy. Another says, "My dad cuddled with me this morning." And so these kids are being taught to collect small and big moments of happiness. And now at this particular school district, 16 elementary schools in this small town have been holding happiness courses once a week. And they feel like the needs are urgent. An international study shows a drastic increase in depression, anxiety, and persistent frustration among young people compared to pre-pandemic levels. When you look at it in more detail, more than a third of US students reported last year that they experienced poor mental health during the COVID pandemic, and 44% described themselves as persistently sad or hopeless. It's worse with girls, of course. And 60% of the female students reported experiencing persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, and nearly 25% of the girls had made suicide plans. So it's a serious issue. And now in different places, schools and universities are responding to the mental health crisis by implementing stress relief and mental well-being programs. And they have started to focus on happiness. And is happiness something that can be taught at schools? They ask, should it be taught? What is happiness? They defined it as subjective well-being. And, we want the best for our children, and giving them the best resources to go through life happily is a right thing to do. And it turns out core competencies such as regulating emotions, gratitude, and self-mastery, these are skills that can be taught. One person who's behind much of this work, Karina Mathis, was a trained speech therapist, and she discovered happiness research accidentally by reading a magazine article. And she says, until then, I didn't know you could learn happiness. I thought either you were happy or you are not. And she did a deep dive into the research and developed a happiness curriculum in 2016 that was the basis for what was being done in these German schools and in other places. And what they have found with the kids is families, pets, friends, and hobbies are the happiness factors that kids mention the most. They also regularly talk about their grandparents. What they don't talk about in terms of happiness is material goods or things like computer games. So the things they talk about are all these human factors. And in different places around the world, in India, 1 million students are learning happiness in school. And there's a project going in Australia and in Bavaria, like we heard about here. And the participants report they found increased well-being and self-confidence. Teachers note less conflict in schools, and the students say they learn more easily. And this is interesting. They did a 30-minute online training involving 4,000 students. And this 30-minute training had a good effect. They say confronting with a stressful situation, 9 months after this, the participants stayed more relaxed in a stressful situation and reported they had less anxiety than the control group. And they were 14% more successful in finishing the academic year. And so some people caution about using positive psychology in class because it's been misunderstood as positive thinking that the glass is half full. But the truth is, the exercises encourage the kids to get in touch with their true feelings and express them appropriately. The teachers also report profiting from the classes. When teachers study the neurobiological research to prepare for the class, they learn it too. And so we're getting good reports from the teachers. And so now We can go to school to be happy. Fred, before the thing, talked about the most successful Yale extension course ever, which is a college course on being happy. So maybe it's time to be happy. I think that's our main job at this stage of life.
Very true. I'm a speech pathologist, and I took that article and I shared it with many of my colleagues that are still working, counselors and such, because so much of it is just self-awareness. I mean, increasing awareness.
Yes,
It's not like, dad's gonna hug him anymore if he's
Right.
taking this course. But that one little hug and how important that is,
right.
could almost make his day and sort of carry him through that day. Great article, great
Yes.
article.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Now, in the mindfulness sessions that I lead,
Mhm.
periodically I come back to working with gratitude, because that's
Oh, yeah,
one of
yeah.
the things that, among other things, being grateful makes your meditation better.
Mhm, mhm. Nice, nice one.
Uh-huh. Okay. Then we're gonna go to the last story. A single injection of stem cells slashes risks of heart attack or stroke by 58%. And this is a new stem cell therapy and a new way to treat heart failure. And the people doing the study say we've made an enormous step to be able to harness the real power of adult stem cells to be treating the heart. And more than 6 million Americans live with chronic heart failure, and there's no cure. The best they can do are medications, lifestyle changes, and surgery to slow the progression and alleviate symptoms. It doesn't cure the condition. And so their long-term outcomes are still the same. And so what they targeted here with this is inflammation, and inflammation is closely associated with heart failure, and chronic inflammation of the heart can be dangerous. They know this already. And so with this background, regenerative medicine company Mesoblast is developing a heart failure treatment that directly targets inflammation. It's made from a kind of stem cell known to have anti-inflammatory effects. And these are mesenchymal precursor cells, MPCs, and these stem cells come from bone marrow of healthy adults and are multiplied in a lab using proprietary methods. And when you put these into an inflamed heart, it activates the stem cells, and then the stem cells then start secreting anti-inflammatories. And again, treat participants' risk of heart attack or stroke dropped by 58%. They have gone through a randomized phase 3 trial. They still have one more trial that is necessary before they release it. But for the first time, they have discovered that stem cells can successfully treat the inflammation that causes heart failure. So I think that is a big story for all of us who have gray hair and who have hearts. I'm ready for
Richard-
my shot.
Richard, when you sent this out, you said, I wonder when it will come to Ahihi.
Yes,
There's an awful lot of this going on already in Ahihi. Isn't that true? Like Dr. Justina, who does physio stuff, has been doing this for years. And I know a lot of our friends have done it. One thing I was a little bit miffed at, about 4 years ago, I went in and I said, can I have stem cell treatment? And she said, but have you had cancer? And I said, yeah, I had cancer. And she said, until 5 years have gone by, we won't give you stem cells
Wow.
because we think the stem cells might exacerbate the cancer and might come back.
Mhm.
And I hear some other people think that stem cells get rid of cancer. So I don't know how to sort that out.
No.
But I wonder if there are many other places other than Dr. Justina's office who are doing it in Ahihi. But I think it's really worth pursuing exactly where you are.
Now, what I don't know, I know that there are people doing cardiac stem cells injections and HEHIC. What I don't know is what kind of stem cells they're using, because
I think
this.
some of it's placenta.
Okay, well, this is particularly from the spine. And so I think for this to work, at least this is what this science shows, it was just a particular kind of stem cell that is good against inflammation. Now, what you say about the cancer risk, I don't know about stem cells, but certainly in the work they've done with epigenetics, when they were able to roll the epigenetic clock back to 0, they thought that would be a good anti-aging thing. But it turns out when you roll the epigenetic clock back to 0, cancer becomes much more common. So they get to restart, and when they restart, I guess it's easier to make cancer. So yeah, I know they're doing, that's why I think since they're already doing some of this stuff around here, I suspect this will be, we will get this treatment faster than they get it in a lot of other places. I just don't know if anybody is doing the right kind of stem cells.
And I thought at some level, stem cells are such that it can be used anywhere because it becomes what it's needed at that place.
But there still are a lot of different stem cells, and there are the kind of stem cells, I think they call them pluripotent stem cells, which can become anything. And then after that, there are a lot of stem cells that already have some kind of, body focus, like skin stem cells and things like that. They have.
Yeah, but I had the impression, I could be wrong, but with Dr. Justina's stuff, with using placentas, if they need something for your knees, they put it into your knee and then you get knee cells from it. If you need something for some other part of the body, it puts it and it becomes that. But anyway, I'm not sure, but I want to look at it a little bit more when I go back next winter, because now it'll be 5 years.
Okay, very good. Well, let us know. If we don't know by then, let us know, Fred. You can be our pioneer. Okay, well, that's it, guys. It's been a great run. I have enjoyed this immensely. We'll still continue to do the weekly science newsletter and am happy at any time to talk about any of this with any of you. I might need to study first before we talk. But
Thanks a
Rich.
lot, Richard.
Rich,
Yeah.
before we go, could you just tell us, because, okay, I've followed you for about 5 years. What do you remember learning for the first time and now you've seen such an advancement? Do you know what I mean? For example, electric cars, were they just coming out 5 or 6 years ago?
it's
or-
complicated for me because since I was 10 years old, I've been
Oh,
reading
you've been
all this
reading.
science
Okay.
fiction.
I got it. I
And
understand.
So
Okay,
I can't sort out the truth from friction,
right,
except the
Well-
truth seems to be more interesting sometimes.
right. Well, thank you very, very much.
You're
Thank you.
certainly welcome. It's been a real pleasure, and I feel like through this, I've gotten several more good friends, and so I'm
Thank you.
appreciative for that as well. So adios, good science, and
Peace.
peace. This is, yeah, okay.
Bye.